Hello and welcome to Tattered Cover, our continuing virtual event series. If you're tuning in, you're obviously a baseball fan and love baseball books and talking about baseball, and we have a slew of events, so thank you. My name is Adam, and I'm just here to introduce Tattered Cover and then turn it over to Tim today. I just want to inform you, if you need closed captioning, there is a closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen, so you can hit the CC button and it turns into closed captioning. If you're interested in more author events for our baseball series, I put a link in the chat. Just check that out. We have one more event today and quite a few tomorrow. And then we actually have some in-person events. So if you're in Denver for the All-Star game or just in Denver in general, we have in-person game events, including one with Tim Neverett, who is moderating today's event. He will be doing a signing and a talk in person on Monday. So please check that out. Also, if you're in Denver, right across the street from Coors Field, we have our new location in a building called McGregor Square. We have 1,000 baseball books. We have a pop-up shop. So please check that out. You can get both of today's panelists. Their books are there, so please check that out. And yeah, please put your questions in the chat. We'll get to them at the end. But I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who will introduce Tim and Eric. So please, gentlemen, you can unmute yourselves and take over, and I'll hop in the background.
All right, thank you very much, Adam. I'm Tim Neverett. What I normally do when I'm not moderating chats on books is do radio and television for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I actually just finished a game. We had an early game against the Miami Marlins, which the Dodgers won 6-1. And because broadcasters aren't traveling, I was able to get back to my apartment in LA in plenty of time to do this once the game ended. So happy that we didn't have a 4-hour and 34-minute game like we did a couple of nights ago, and would have made me late, but I'm glad we're here on time today. And books are important, and we're going to introduce the authors here in a second and talk about theirs. I've written a book too that's coming out in August called COVID Curveball, about the Dodgers 2020 pandemic season and all the differences about that. So I can really appreciate what Timothy and what Eric have gone through in terms of the publishing process and getting books in front of people and really appreciating books. So we want to introduce Tim Malcolm, who is the author of Moon Baseball Road Trips. Tim, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Hi, Tim. It's great to be here, and thank you to Tattered Cover for having me.
And also Eric Nusbaum, who wrote Stealing Home. It is about Dodger Stadium, how it was built and why it was built and what happened. There's a lot of stuff about that we'll get into. And Eric, we want to welcome you.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Well, let's start with Tim first. The baseball road trips is something certainly I know I can relate to because I've been on a lot of them, except in the last year and a half. I've been on the longest homestand ever because broadcasters still are not traveling for the most part in baseball. But when I was traveling a lot, and I've traveled in the minor leagues too, you see all these great ballparks. What inspired you to come up with this road trip book, and how'd you put it together?
Well, I've always been a huge baseball fan. I grew up in Philadelphia. My dad took me to Phillies games when I was a kid, and I think it might have been because he took me to Veterans Stadium when I was little that actually made me really interested in seeing other ballparks in America, because Veterans Stadium is maybe not, for those who don't know, it was one of the kind of, more basic stadiums, I guess, if you want to be charitable, concrete, multi-purpose stadium. And so from an early age, I was always very interested in ballparks. The first great ballpark that I really went to was Fenway Park. And I remember coming out of the tunnel, seeing the grass, seeing the green monster, and just, being beside myself. And I knew that that's what I wanted to be doing at some point in my life, was to write about these ballparks or share my love of these ballparks in some way. And so many years later, I was actually approached by the folks behind the Moon Guides, and they said, we know that you have a real interest in baseball and you love ballparks. Would you be interested in this book? And I said, absolutely. I'm going to, put together a proposal for this. And that came together really well. And about 2 years or so later, we had this book, and it's just a dream come true for me.
Well, it's more about just the ballparks themselves. Anybody can find directions. And I know you've got other aspects of other things to do in the cities. I can tell you a lot of things that I've learned about just traveling around. I know in Seattle is one of the great spots because when I was with the Red Sox, and we would travel to Seattle, my radio partner, Joe Castiglione, and I would always go kayaking in Lake Washington during the morning. So and sometimes I would go to the fish market and I would actually get fish and I'd have it shipped home. So it's there's a lot of neat things to do aside from going to the ball games. I know you've chronicled a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, in fact, you mentioned the fish market in Seattle. I actually have that in the book. One of the things you can do while in Seattle is get some smoked salmon. And I actually ate it right there, but you can actually have it shipped home as well. And yeah, you can do everything from museums to kayaking, as you said. Places like Detroit have a really great scene where you can just go out in the lake and kayak for a bit. Obviously, if you want to kayak at the park over at El Orco Park in San Francisco, you can do that. So we have all that information for people, everything from what to do outside to where to go to be part of the city, be part of the action, restaurants, bars, breweries, all that stuff, because baseball fans just want to be in the cities and have a good time in those cities.
We're going to come back to you a little bit, Tim. I wanted to Eric introduce his book, and we'll go back and forth a little bit and bring him back in. But Eric, your book, Stealing Home, it's about a subject matter that is close to a lot of Angelinos' hearts, especially those with Mexican heritage, and on the basic land acquisition of Dodger Stadium, where I just left a few minutes ago. And it's not the most pleasant of stories, certainly, but there's a history there that I think that a lot of people want to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's an important story, and it's got some pleasant aspects to it and some sort of heroic aspects to it, but the book really gets into the kind of the setup to how we got Dodger Stadium. And there was these three communities that were, what we now call Chavez Ravine, and how they were pretty much destroyed to make way for a public housing project in LA in the early 50s, and how that housing project was then railroaded by special interests, which left the families sort of evicted for no reason. And a few families stayed on the land and fought and tried to get their houses back and their community back. But the city sold the land to Walter O'Malley, the owner of the Dodgers from Brooklyn. After some pretty intense resistance, the LA County sheriffs evicted the final families, and we have in my opinion, most beautiful ballpark in baseball now in LA, which is sort of a strange cherry on the top of a sad story.
Yeah, it's amazing because it's a fantastic ballpark, and I'm sure Tim has it. I know he has it chronicled in his book because it's, I think, the first picture I saw when I looked at it was Dodger Stadium. But and everybody talks about Dodger Stadium as being like the perfect kind of ballpark to watch a game in, and they had a lot of foresight when they built it. They built it in incredible open space, and there's 365 some odd acres that it's built on. But it didn't come without personal cost to some families in a very, very public eviction.
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, it's a really ugly chapter in LA's history. And I wouldn't even necessarily say in the Dodgers history, because a lot of the trauma preceded the Dodgers move west. A lot of it is really the city and, the city's politics, and the sort of questions about, what are your values as a society, as a community. There were 1,000 families that lived there, and they were evicted to kind of under false pretenses. Imagine now if you were told you had to leave your home to make way for some sort of public structure, right? And then instead of a public structure, the city changed its mind and sold your backyard to a sports franchise from the opposite coast. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, it's different. And, I'm fortunate. I get to see the guy almost every day that really kind of brought the Mexican-American community back. And that's Fernando Valenzuela in 1981, when he just came on the scene and was unbelievable. And it brought the Latino fans back to Dodger Stadium, where they really weren't showing up at the beginning. I think they knew what the situation was with the city, but not all of them really embraced the Dodgers, I think, until Fernando Mania.
Yeah, it's interesting. Walter O'Malley, and writing the book was really fascinating because I got to learn a lot about him and his vision. You mentioned how much foresight there was into the stadium's construction, and he had a really big plan, a specific idea of what he wanted Dodger Stadium to be like, which is remarkably like what it still is now. But he had a plan, which was to attract, Mexican American fans basically in LA back in the 50s. Even with all the eviction stuff, he hired the first all Spanish language broadcast crew to work every game, right? Jaime Hedin started in the Dodgers' second year in LA.
Still there, still there.
Still there, yeah. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, he knew he wanted the team to be appealing to everybody, but I think it took a while to earn trust back, especially after what had happened.
And the Spanish broadcast crew consists of Jaime Hedin, Pepe Inez, and Fernando Valenzuela, who was there today again. I mean, so they still do it on both radio and television. And I asked Jaime one time about how many rings he has. And he said he got a ring in his first year. And I said, oh, so you thought it was easy, right? So that was when they played over at the Coliseum before they went to Dodger Stadium. Now, Tim, in your book, Baseball Road Trips, what do you say about Dodger Stadium? You know, what are the things to do? What would you plan? What's the best way to plan a trip around going to see a Dodger game? Because it's not an inner downtown type of ballpark where you can just walk around right around the ballpark. It's not Fenway, it's not Wrigley, it's not Coors Field in Denver, it's not, Petco Park. And you've got to time it right to go park there. You've got to, invest a little time.
Yeah, it is kind of in a weird sort of situation, right? Because while it is a gorgeous park, as Eric said, and I think it is one of the most appropriate places to see a game, it is sort of in the middle of a place where you have to sort of schedule out time beforehand to really experience it. I have, and there are some places where you can go to, Koreatown is kind of one place where you want to go beforehand, especially if it's your first time in LA. It's close enough to where you can get a bite to eat around that area before going to the ball game. As you said, parking is a really interesting part of the Dodger Stadium experience because you kind of have to drive there. But you can take, if you get there early enough, you can get $5 parking at this lot that's way down, sort of, down a hill a bit, and you have to kind of get there early, and then you have to kind of climb the hill to get up there. And what people don't realize about Dodger Stadium and the way that it was constructed, as Eric in his book obviously talks about, is that, you come into Dodger Stadium sort of on the top and you kind of look down from that point on. So it's a really interesting setup. And you want to take some time to sort of marvel at the beauty of Dodger Stadium when you get there. But also keep in mind that there was a real cost to the construction of that ballpark. In the book, there are parts in the book where I talk about some of the realities about the ballparks that were constructed and some of the social realities that, that cities had to face, and that some populations are not accessible to parks maybe in the way that they really should be. And so, Dodger Stadium is one instance where there was a real cost to building the ballpark. And so while you want to marvel at the park, get your Dodger dog and all of that, keep in mind that it did really take a lot of controversy to get where we are today with that ballpark.
They just put $100 million into it just before the pandemic and renovations. And now finally the fans are getting to get a look at that. I can't wait
to get in there to see it. I heard you been all the way around now, not since the new updates.
Oh, you got to go.
For a COVID test.
Yeah.
Home game tomorrow. You went for a COVID test.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing, because of the parking there and because of how Dodger Stadium is laid out, it actually was the largest COVID testing area. I don't know, maybe California or maybe the world, I don't know. And then they also used another part of the lot for vaccinations, which was the largest vaccination site in California too. Those are all closed up now, but they were there for quite a long time. I'd say 15 months, especially the testing site. So as you know, Eric, because you got it done there. But one more question for you before we go back to Eric, Tim, is do you have a favorite park, whether it's a major league or a minor league park or any other park, and with the criteria of how to get there? Is it walkable? What are the other things to do around it that you really enjoy?
Well, personally, and I think this kind of also fits for the narrative, is Fenway Park. As I said, it was the first park that I went to that was really, something outside of that multi-purpose stadium. It's the area around Fenway has been built up really well. That Jersey Street sort of area where you have all those vendors, from the sausage guy to different shopping possibilities. They have little bars where you can go to the bar and then kind of go underground under the street and go into the ballpark that way. You can kind of go in and out of the ballpark to Jersey Avenue there, or Jersey Street, going back and forth, which is a really cool thing that really no other park has. But also all the fun little things that you can see with the monster, Pesky's pole, the triangle in center field. And, you know, it's one of the more expensive parks to go see in baseball. The Red Sox do make you pay a lot for a ticket there, but it's relatively accessible. It's off the T, which is the major transportation agency there. You can just hop on a train from almost anywhere in the city and get to Fenway relatively easy. And, you know, there's a lot to do around the park where you can have a good time, get there a couple hours early, and then hang out a couple hours after the game and go to a bar or two and, you know, hang out with Red Sox fans who, you know, for the most part are really good people. I mean, I know a lot of Red Sox fans and they have some fun. So I think it's probably my favorite.
It's because your Phillies aren't a threat to them. That's why. But if you were a Yankee fan, Tim, you might have a different opinion. All right. See, I grew up in New England. I went to college in Boston. I did the Red Sox games for 3 years. I used to live on the corner of Jersey Street and Boylston Ave for a year and a half. So I would see the pregame, postgame stuff as I'm commuting across the street to go to work. It's a fun environment. It really is. There aren't too many places like Fenway Park. It's a great ballpark, and the city itself, you have all kinds of things you can do. You can go down to the North End and go get some of the best pastries you've ever had at Mike's Pastries.
Mike's Pastry, yep.
Yeah, and you know, of course, you've got the public gardens and Boston Common and the Commonwealth Ave Mall. You got all these things there. That's one of the most walkable cities there is, and there's this cool little ballpark there that didn't fit, so they built a 37-foot high wall in left field to kind of jam it into a city block. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, I do have to mention, you mentioned going to school in Boston. I also went to school in Boston. I went to Boston University. And I was there in 2004 when they won the World Series. And being that close to the ballpark, living that close and working that close and having all the fans. And the night that they won, the fans just running to Kenmore Square to the ballpark to celebrate. I mean, there's not many experiences like that in baseball. You know, Wrigley's one of them. But just having that sort of close neighborhood feel, it's fantastic.
And the fans are on top of the players, too, in the ballpark. I mean, you're really, really close. And it's really neat. And people ask me, you know, you're a New England guy. You were doing the Red Sox. Why would you leave the Red Sox to go to the Dodgers? And Eric can appreciate this because it's the Dodgers, and it is Dodger Stadium. But when you set out to write your book, Eric, "Stealing Home" is the title. What prompted you, or what motivated you to say, you know what, this is a story that needs to be dug into? Because you've got some interesting reporting in it, and what prompted you and made you tell yourself, all right, I got to dig into this now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in LA, Dodger fan, loving Dodger Stadium. You know, it's my favorite place. It's still my favorite place in the world, probably. Stadium or not stadium. I think it's a remarkable piece of architecture. Getting there is a nightmare, and it's only getting worse every year. But I was in high school, and we had a guest speaker from my U.S. history class who told this story about being blacklisted in 1950s LA. He was a public housing administrator, and he had been kind of in charge of this project to put public housing where Dodger Stadium is. And because of that, he was kind of smeared as a communist, which turned out he was a communist, but he thought secretly. And his life was ruined, and his family's life was ruined, and the project was pretty much ruined. LA elected a new mayor, and the whole turn of events, when I was 16 years old and hearing it for the first time, blew me away. That there was this sort of tragic and complex and mysterious story behind the place that I love so much. And I loved it in a kind of innocent, unthinking way, the way a kid loves baseball. And it didn't stop me from loving Dodger Stadium, but it made me curious about why those things happened. And as I grew up and became a writer and a journalist and kind of learned more about the way the world works, I just never really stopped being interested in the story and being curious about it. So I just kind of knew that there was something there. I was, reading different books about it, and I always felt like there were certain pieces that were missing, maybe that I could do it, not better, but I could fill in gaps. I thought the voices of the communities that were evicted were kind of absent from the narratives around it. I thought there was a lot of misunderstanding about what happened. There's this notion that people have that, the Dodgers moved west and they kicked out the families and they built the stadium, but that really isn't what happened. And the actual story is a lot more complex. I think it says a lot more about our society. So I really wanted to try to untangle it and get it right and do it in a way that was entertaining for readers.
And who are some of the main characters in this one? From the city side, the villain, and who are some of the folks who really, had to sacrifice in this? Who are some of the main characters you can tell us about?
Yeah, so I tried not to think about it in terms of heroes and villains because I just think that gets you kind of into a dangerous space. But in terms of like main characters, so the kind of heart and soul of the book is this woman named Abrana Arechiga, and she had come from Mexico to Arizona to LA with her family, and they lived on Malvina Avenue, which is, if you go around Dodger Stadium, the police academy is right down there, and police academy, the last little bit of Malvina, you can see an alley coming off the police academy onto Elysian Parkway. So that's where they lived. And her family really fought hard against first the public housing project, then against Dodger Stadium. Legally, they were suing, they were trying to take it to the Supreme Court, they were picketing City Hall, and they became the face of the resistance to this construction and to the land seizure. So she's the kind of heart and soul of the book, I think. Followed by Frank Wilkinson, who I just mentioned, and his journey from being this kind of wealthy conservative kid from Beverly Hills to a self-righteous public housing communist, and then his downfall as such. Then the book talks a lot about baseball, and I get into the Dodgers and why LA so badly wanted a major league team. I talk about Duke Snider. I talk about Jackie Robinson. I talk a lot about Willie Davis, who was the opening day center fielder in Dodger Stadium, and I think a player who's underrated as a player and just deeply fascinating as a person.
What about the news yesterday that Reggie Smith was added to Dave Roberts' all-star coaching staff? Major League Baseball had to approve that, but I know a lot of people were pretty excited for one of the former Dodger greats, a 7-time all-star, Reggie Smith. A guy who spent a lot of time. He didn't start with the Dodgers, but he had plenty of significant time with the Dodgers gracing that field.
I think it's great. He's obviously had some ups and downs with the Dodger organization in terms of kind of their relationship, which, I think through the different ownership groups has happened with a few of the old players. I went to Reggie Smith baseball camp one year as a kid, so I'm a fan, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah, my partner on radio, Rick Monday, called him before the game and left a voicemail, and Reggie called back like in the third inning. And so Rick took the phone call and so because they were teammates, and so he gave him a hard time, but a fun time, and told him he was real proud of him. So, but there's so many great players that have come through there. We could talk for hours about that too. But Dodger Stadium is certainly great. We talked to Tim about Fenway Park, and you mentioned the vet. And you mentioned it was a concrete stadium, and I wasn't sure if you were talking about the concrete structure or the concrete AstroTurf, because the vet was known to have the worst playing surface in all of sports.
Oh, yeah, you have the steam coming off of the turf at 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of summer, just terrible. And then the ball bouncing off the turf, making weird bounces, making it tough for anybody to play regular infield there. Yeah, it wasn't the best stadium for sure, and it smelled pretty poor. If you walked along the concourses there,
not the only one.
Yeah. But it wasn't a great place, to experience the baseball game. But as a kid growing up, it was baseball. I got to see baseball in front of me, and really that was the only thing that I cared about at the end of the day.
Yeah, Philadelphia has done a good job. I don't know if you've been there or not, Eric, but Philadelphia's sports complex is pretty cool because you've got where the Phillies play, where the Eagles play, and where the Sixers and the Flyers play, all right together. It's all right there. And then I think the Eagles practice facility is just down the street, just a little bit. So it's on the south side of the city, and it's all right there. The ingress, the egress, they have it all, urban planned out well. I guess that's a bad way to say it, but that's the urban planning went very, very well there. But they've built some things around it, and that's a great place to plan to go. And you can see multiple events within a couple of days. It doesn't just have to be baseball there, but with the Phillies, you know, their ballpark's great. They've got some great ballpark food, and I know that's got to be an important part of any baseball travel book is the local food, no matter where you are.
That's right. I mean, every ballpark has its specialties. For instance, I love that in Marlins Park, the Dodgers are in Miami right now. Sad that you can't be there right now for that, but they have some great Miami-focused food. They have, Cuban sandwiches. They have, burgers with different sorts of, ingredients that are from that area that people enjoy from that area. You also have, Philly cheesesteaks, obviously, and roast pork sandwiches in Philadelphia. My favorite food it's actually not a local food to the area, but they have it in Seattle at T-Mobile Park. There's Edgar Martinez's Cantina, and there they serve Mexican Oaxacan delicacy, fried grasshoppers. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've ever had them before, but they put them in a little cup, and they only serve, I don't have the number with me, but it's Edgar Martinez's lifetime batting average. They only serve that many per game. So you kind of have to get there early. It's 320 or so, something like that. So you get there early, you get your cup of fried grasshoppers, and they taste fantastic. I love them a lot.
Do they flavor? I know they have them there. I've been there. I just haven't been able to draw the courage to go down there and get that.
They put tagine on them, and tagine is that great sort of Mexican chili lime kind of spice mix, and they just flavor them with that, and so it has a really nice bright taste, and there's a little spice to it. They're great. I love them.
Well, let me ask you this: if somebody's planning a road trip, and they could be planning it this summer, and they want to read your book and use that to help them plan, what kind of checklist would you give them, start to finish, to have like the best road trip?
Ooh. Well, when I tell people, if they're going to set out on a trip, if it's for a week, let's say, you want to, give yourself some time. You don't want to be running from place to place and hoping to catch a game and you're going to miss it because you got there late or something happened traffic-wise. So I always tell people to just give yourself some time. If you're going to do something like Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, that kind of area, if you have a week, spend a couple of days in Chicago, hang out in Chicago for a bit. You want to be able to get to a park 2 to 3 hours early. Most parks open about an hour and a half before game time. And so what you want to do is get to that area and talk to fans. I love talking to fans when I get to a ballpark. If it's a place like Wrigley Field, go to Wrigley. I'll go to a couple bars. If it's a place like Milwaukee, American Family up there, they have one of the best tailgating scenes in all of baseball. So go out there, bring a couple bucks with you, and hope to try to trade a couple bucks for a kielbasa and a beer or whatever, bratwurst and beer, and talk to people, right? So that totally. Also, try to look for something to kind of your trip. What I like to do when I get to a ballpark is take a picture of that center field backdrop. You're standing at home plate and you're getting the whole view there. That's one thing I love to do. But also I love to get a pin from every ballpark. So go to the team store. They have usually about 15 to 20 pins of all different kinds, celebrating all different kinds of things. I love to get a pin from each ballpark so I can go back home and say, put them on the wall, and this is where I've been. So try to find a way to remember the trip as well. Take a lot of pictures, talk to a lot of people, and, make sure you sit down and have a good time at the game. Have a beer, have a hot dog, and hang out for a bit. Don't just walk around the park the whole time, because you want to take in the experience of watching a baseball game.
And you're absolutely 100% right about Milwaukee. Yeah. It's neat, and they tailgate probably more than anybody else. And I thought Kansas City would be better because they're better in football. Outside of a Kansas City Chiefs game, I've been to a couple of those in the past. It's wild. It's the best smelling parking lot in the NFL. But in Major League Baseball, Milwaukee, on a nightly basis, they can compete with anybody, and probably they've got more sausages and bratwurst and everything else cooking. And we have often, doing TV games there, we use shots from the parking lot with people out there grilling, and they've got their kegs set up and their cheese wedge hats, and they got everything. It's really a neat place. But that's good. Tim Malcolm, he's written the book Moon Baseball Road Trips, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our home and away segment here. And Eric, stealing home, some of the baseball stories. Can you give us give us another baseball story from the book?
Sure. So one thing I talk about in the book is the invention of baseball. I get a little bit into the kind of Abner Doubleday mythology and how baseball was sort of marketed as a product in the early days of the sport by Albert Spalding. Albert Spalding, sporting goods manufacturer, one of the founders of the National League. He was a good pitcher for, I think, the Rockford Forest Cities or something. I can't remember what the team's name was called, but back in the 19th century, in the early days, in the dead ball era. And he really kind of invented the idea that Abner Doubleday invented baseball as a way to sell the sport as a national pastime and kind of garner patriotic support for it. And his marketing genius really is a big part of why we have the sort of look and feel of baseball that we do now. And I talked in the book about him. He was a very interesting guy. He got into this sort of obscure quasi-religious cult called Theosophy with a compound in San Diego. And Abner Doubleday himself, who was a Civil War hero, was also part of Theosophy, and that might have been why he became the inventor of baseball. That's pretty early in the book, but I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. I know you love Dodger Stadium, and so I've got a story for you that you haven't heard yet about Dodger Stadium. And we just actually on today's broadcast of the game that I was working with Rick Monday, we finally let the cat out of the bag because it's been the biggest secret on campus for a year and a half. Where Rick Monday was living during the pandemic and all of this season up until this week. He was in a motorhome in the parking lot of Dodger Stadium.
Really?
Yes. And folks on this call are hearing this for the first time because I've known it since the beginning, but we were in interest of security. We did not say anything. There were a few people that had found out in the media. They were asked not to say anything, and they were denied doing stories because they were concerned that somebody might know that Rick is there and try to break into Dodger Stadium, which somebody actually did. A collector that he actually had met before found him at the motorhome and asked him to look at a bat. But other than that, he did talk about it first today on the radio, where he said, because now the motorhome has been moved off of the property, but he had a friend who didn't have anywhere to store it. So Rick said, I'll live in it. And the Dodgers ran power, water, and internet to his motorhome that was wedged into a little tiny lot just off to the side of where the Dodger employee lot is. On the third base side. So he lived in there and he can tell you firsthand about all of the wildlife that is around there, the number of animals, the raccoons, the coyotes that came into his little compound during his time there, and all the things that go on overnight. And, he's, as you mentioned, the police academy is right there, and you can hear them. You can hear the gun range loud and clear when there's nobody there. When the parking lot's empty and the ballpark's empty, I mean, it sounds like a war zone some days. But yeah, so that's going to be a story that I think people will be picking up here in the coming days, maybe weeks. It is a story that's in my book. I had to hold off talking about it until the RV actually left the premises of Dodger Stadium. But because of the release date of the book, it was going to be released after Rick left. So we kept it quiet until then. But the whole story is in there, and some of the things that we did at the motorhome, and we were just out there watching the Stanley Cup Finals the other night. It is one of his two TVs that he's got.
Have the Dodgers considered keeping it and renting it out as an Airbnb for fans?
It would have been a remarkable idea, and I'm sure that if they had thought of it, they might have done it. But they might bring one back. I would think that's a good idea. I might have Rick recommend that to them. But I thought you'd get a kick out of that story since. He talked about it for the first time today on the radio, so I figured, okay, it's safe to start talking about it now. But,
yeah, that's incredible.
But pretty neat. We're going to take some questions here. We've got about a few minutes before we're going to get to questions. So if you want questions, put them in the chat. Questions for Eric, questions for Tim about baseball road trips or about stealing home and in the situation where that land was cleared. One thing too, Eric, about Dodger Stadium and how that area was, there's an area on the 5th floor that's outside the Vince Scully press box that is kind of like a museum. It's got all kinds of old memorabilia. And when you look down, there are some architectural charts. And there's one there that's hanging on a wall that shows the area, kind of a topographical 3D model before the stadium was built and what that land looked like.
It's completely different.
Yeah, and I stop and look at that every once in a while because I have to pass by it pretty often. And I just look at it and I go, I can't believe what it must have been like there. I mean, it's almost like moving the San Gabriel Mountains and the Angeles National Forest closer to downtown. But that there was, a lot of trees, a lot of hills, just a whole different area before, the city started doing it. And even before the people started settling in that neighborhood and creating a neighborhood that isn't there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the ambition of the Dodger Stadium kind of architecture. Like Walter O'Malley and his team, Emil Prager was the engineer who we worked with on the stadium. They completely, talk about changing landscape. They completely remade the landscape. They moved millions of tons of dirt. I think enough dirt to fill the Empire State Building twice is what the Dodgers said at the time. Flattening hills, moving trees. It was, it's almost like, one of those things where it's like the power of man against nature, where you really just change the natural world. And the place, if you, talk to an old timer who was there before, 1959, when they started construction, they'll say that it's unrecognizable. It's kind of amazing.
It really is. It's different. And again, it's different because as Tim knows, and he points in his book, to get there on a road trip, you have got a plan to get there. It's not like you have public transportation on a train or something that'll just drop you off out in front, like you have in Philadelphia, for example. You can take the SEPTA down there, or in Oakland and San Francisco, you can take the BART, and you can take public transportation in San Francisco. The Bay Area has a couple neat ballparks, Tim. I would say that Oracle Park is really good. And one thing about it is that if you're sitting in the radio or TV booth and you take the binoculars out like this, right? There's an area by the center field scoreboard you can look through. There's 2 light standards that go up. Look between the light standards, and there is the Oakland Coliseum. Yeah. So you can see one. It's the only place you can see one major league stadium from another.
Wow.
And, maybe as the crow flies in New York, those 2 stadiums are probably closer mileage-wise, or as the bird flies, but you can't see it. But you can actually see one from the other if you're looking in the right spot, which I find pretty fascinating. But you've got Oracle Park, which is newer. It's beautiful. It's right on McCovey Cove. It's got so many neat features. And then you get the Coliseum.
I actually like the Coliseum quite a bit. I know it is one of these older multi-purpose parks, and it used to be really one of the great contemporary parks in the mold of an Angel Stadium or even Dodger Stadium. And of course, Al Davis of the Raiders decided to put a mountain of seats in center field.
Mount Davis, they call it.
Mount Davis. Yeah. But what I like about the Coliseum is that they have tried a lot over the past several years to put experiences in the park where if you want to, get a drink amongst fans, there's a really big bar area out there in left field, and there are great standing room areas out there as well. The fans show up, right? The right field area where all the local fans bring out their drums and their musical instruments and play along, whether the A's are good or bad. That's a real key part of the park that most parks don't have, that sort of soccer ambiance almost. And it is accessible. As you said, you get right off the BART, you walk across the walkway there, and there's the ballpark. And it actually has one of the better tailgating scenes in all of baseball. They really do know how to have fun there, even though the park itself is not the best. And I know, there's been so much about the A's maybe leaving Oakland and the city, of course, not wanting to have a ballpark, and, San Jose maybe not, and maybe somewhere else. And the A's fans, obviously, what are we going to do? Do we even want the A's here anymore because they don't want to be here? That's the kind of stuff that, will always happen, with ballparks. You're going to have those push and pull, that tug of war. But I give the A's fans credit for hanging in and still being great fans of their team with the conditions that they still have.
And I know that the vote in Alameda County is coming up this month, whether or not they're going to vote to build a new ballpark or not. If it's not, I know the A's people have been in Las Vegas getting site tours. Now, if they end up moving to Las Vegas, that's not just a chapter. That's a whole other book for you to plan a road trip in Las Vegas. Even with the AAA ballpark they've got there now, it's awesome. It's, in fact, the players with the Oakland A's, because it's the Oakland A's affiliate, as a matter of fact, in Las Vegas, the players there have better facilities. They've got a better locker room. They've got a better training facility. They got better weight facility. They got a better facility in AAA than they do in the majors. And so it's just different. It's a whole different setup there. But who knows? We may see some movement in baseball, and we might see some expansion too coming up in the near future. I personally think that in order to recoup some of the money that these owners have lost due to the pandemic, that they're probably going to, my guess, I don't have anybody on the inside telling me this. It's just common sense. I would think they'd try to speed up expansion to get expansion fees and put some more money in the owners' coffers. But, we might be 4 or 5 years away from some serious conversation about having new teams, maybe going back to Montreal. Montreal would be a great road trip city, wouldn't it?
Oh, I love Montreal. I've been there before. It is one of the best eating cities in the entire country. It's so multicultural, but it also has that great sort of historic, French Canadian background. So there's plenty of poutine to have as well. And, if you move it even closer to downtown, I think you really have a great ballpark experience there. The old Olympic Stadium out there, sort of out in the corner, the eastern part of the city. But, it's a great ballpark town. I mean, growing up watching Expos games a lot because the Phillies are in the same division as them, hearing that, air horn out in the outfield, that lone fan out there, that's the kind of stuff I want to get back, that kind of fandom.
Yeah. When I was a kid growing up, we just barely got cable TV before, Major League Baseball kind of put it all together. There was these super stations, right? So you got cable. All of a sudden now you have the Yankees and the Mets and the Atlanta Braves and the Chicago Cubs. And we got Canal 3 out of Montreal, which was the Expos game in French, so, you'd hear the announcer, un ball du prise or Warren Cromartie, and it was really fun to watch the games in French and pick up baseball French and things like that. But I think there's a lot of folks that would love to see the Expos back there, and there'd be some great road cities. One more thing on that, I want to get back to Eric, but a great road trip city, but a terrible ballpark is Tampa Bay, St. Pete.
I'm with you. It's not aesthetically pleasing for sure. The dome, Tropicana Field there. You're right about Tampa, St. Pete. I mean, St. Petersburg, there's a really cool little downtown scene there.
Great area, yeah.
Yeah, it's not far away from the ballpark either. Like Green Bench Brewing, one of my favorite breweries in the whole country, is a great brewery to go to after a game. And then, of course, Tampa's got a cool little thing going on. Clearwater's a great little city with great beaches. Dunedin's a great beer town near Clearwater. Tampa's fantastic. I like the park a little more. It's not, like I said, not aesthetically pleasing, but it at least has a lot going on for fans. You can do a lot of great things there, from touching a ray in the ray tank to, making your own baseball card. And, there's more experiences. I think they've realized there at Tampa that people are not coming for the ballpark. They're coming for the team or the experiences around the ballpark. And
they just moved the Ted Williams Museum out of there. It was there for a while, and I happen to know the executive director of that, and they just moved all the stuff out. They've got some of it in storage, and they've donated some of the stuff. But
that was a phenomenal little place. That museum and that little hall of hitters that they have there, that was fantastic.
Yeah, that's neat. Eric, about stealing home, what did you learn when you went through all your research and everything else? So you sat back and went, wow, I never imagined that.
That was a lot. Almost everything in the book. It was an experience of being kind of awed by what I was finding frequently. I was amazed by how similar things were back then to how they are now. Politically, the book talks about corruption and the city council of LA dealing with real estate developers. And right after I published it, a LA city council member was arrested for taking bribes from real estate developers. I was like, this is exactly what happened in 1954. It deals with kind of fake news and sort of media with agendas and how that gets leveraged for special interests. And obviously that's been on people's minds in the last few years, especially. So I think that the echoes of the book were a lot stronger than I was initially expecting or thinking about.
Name of the book is Stealing Home. Eric Nusbaum, great to talk to you about this. And we're going to let Adam come back and handle some of the Q&A. Of course, Tim Malcolm, Moon Baseball Road Trips. Baseball road trips are fun. I'd encourage you to get on some. I'm hoping to get on some sometime. I don't know when, but I'd love to get back on the road and enjoy the road cities and the ballparks too. So, but when we can all do that again, and you can do it as fans now. So I'd highly encourage you to do it. Adam?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few questions. The one is, and you've already talked about all of your favorite ballparks and the ones that are bad ballparks, good road trip cities. For all three of you, what is a ballpark that people may not think is good, but it secretly is good? What's your favorite hidden gem?
You want to start?
Go ahead, Ted.
Oh, for me?
All three of you.
Okay, a secret gem of a ballpark, San Diego, Petco Park. It's beautiful. The hotel that the teams stay in most of the time has a walkway on the fourth floor that connects from the hotel directly to the park. So you don't have to walk downstairs or anything. You just go right into the park. But you're right in the middle of the gas lamp district. I mean, you're smack dab in the middle of it. And not to mention the weather is awesome. There's another hotel down the street called the Manchester Grand Hyatt, which I've stayed in more often. It's great. But the USS Midway Museum is right there. There's the Maritime Museum that's just up the street. You can get in a Russian submarine. You can get in different kind of great watercraft that's there. San Diego, to me, is one of the best cities to take a road trip in. And oh, by the way, the ballpark's awesome. And everything is walkable downtown. And that's one of my favorite places to go. And all the things around there is really, really good.
So it's not called Marlins Park anymore. I think it's called Lone Depot, which brings it down a couple notches because the name is terrible. But where the Marlins play in Miami is actually one of the coolest parks. It doesn't look like any other park in baseball. It is, to me, what classifies as sort of like a neo-modern park. There's that glass window, windows of walls there in the outfield. It's very white, very minimalistic, but there's pops of local art all over the place. It provides a lot of color to the ballpark. And as I said earlier, the food is really great there. There's like Jose Andres food there, and you can get, authentic Cuban coffee there, and, some really just thoughtful ideas for food and drink at that ballpark. And it's also like wide concourses, and it's never very full. So when you can actually like really pay attention to the game and have a good time and kind of do what you want to do. And the main concourse is really kind of one main concourse, and it has everything. So you're not going to get lost in the park either. It's a really fun park to navigate. Also, close to a lot of things going on in Miami. So after the game, you can go check out bars and, go to nearby neighborhoods. I think, I forget the name of it. It's Wynwood or something like that. The neighborhood over there. It's wonderful. I love Marlins Park. It's
Wow, that was going to be my choice. I'm a huge fan of Marlins Park. I love how modern it is. I also love Petco. I pretty much like every baseball park. I live in Tacoma, Washington, so I will say that I love T-Mobile and I love, formerly Safeco Field. I think it's great and has held up really well, and they've done a great job kind of updating it throughout the years. But for my unexpected park, I like, I can't remember what it's called now, Guaranteed Rate Field, where the White Sox play. I don't think people give it any love. I think it's a great place to watch a game. It's weird in interesting ways. It's got great fans. It's just like, it just feels like a ball game vibe to me in an unspeakable, or like, I don't have the right words for it, but yeah, I like watching a game there. It's just, it feels like baseball.
It's so much different than Wrigley on the north side. It's like the polar opposite, where it's right off the highway. You just pull in, park. Plenty of parking. Wrigley doesn't have that. It's got a lot of neat stuff. I like seeing games there. I think that's a good vantage point from where we sit there.
And for beer lovers, I think it has the best craft beer bar in the whole game, the Craft Cave, which is out in right field. It has over 100 craft beers, including some really hard to find bottles that are especially local. So check that out.
Shouldn't discount Coors Field in Denver either. Talk about craft beer. There's lots of breweries in downtown. I mean, they got some breweries downtown now that really, I don't know if there's a downtown that has more breweries and places to eat and places to go. And, the best, one of the biggest and best sports bars I've been in, Blake Street Tavern, is right a block from the ballpark. It's just on the opposite side of where Tattered Cover is in McGregor Square. It's just the other way. But there's so much around Coors Field in Denver, and the ballpark itself is gorgeous. The only problem with that ballpark is where they put home plate, because at about 7:10 in the evening, the sun's coming down and it's right in the first baseman's eyes. So if there's a ground ball to third, ground ball to short, first baseman's got to battle the sun too for a little bit. But other than that, it's really good. I think Coors Field's pretty underrated.
Yeah, I just moved to Denver right before the pandemic, so I missed last season, obviously, and I've been going this season. And I'm a bleacher creature. I have to be in bleachers wherever I go to a game. And I moved here from Phoenix, and I tell you, I kind of miss an indoor stadium. I'm not gonna lie. It's I miss that 70-degree air conditioning with no sun. Question for Eric. You write for Vice. You've been all over. You have your series with Defector. They just actually released an article like 2 hours ago. What other weird sports? Not weird, because Stealing Home wasn't weird. But what kind of sports story would you try to? Can you imagine writing a book-length story on? Is there anything that has sparked your interest recently?
Not for a book-length thing. Writing a book, and both Tims could probably speak to this as well, it's a big commitment. Like, you have to really care and love what you're doing and be ready to invest painful hours and months and years to get to the end of it. I don't know if I have a sports subject in mind for another book right now, to be honest.
Definitely. And then we'll wrap up with this question, maybe two more. The one is, we talked about your hidden gems. Are there any stadiums, like, other than the Trop, but like you just can't wait for a new stadium for that team? Any ones that stand, mid-tier teams that could use a reboot stadium?
Ooh. Well, Toronto, the Blue Jays. That's kind of the answer, I think. And as much as I love the location of it, it's right downtown. It's just the kind of park that, when it was created, it served a purpose, and it was at the time something that had never been seen before in a ballpark. But so much has changed with the way we envision ballparks and the ballpark experience that, it does need a change. It needs to be a smaller stadium. It needs to be built differently. It needs to more, the character of the Blue Jays isn't quite in that park. And then along with that, I don't know if there's a worse ballpark for food and drink than Rogers Center. So, I could use a real refresh on that. But Toronto's a great city as it is, and the Blue Jays fans are fantastic. They travel. In fact, a lot of them travel to Seattle when they
crazy,
because they're right across the border there. They just go right in. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I hope that they can do something there, because that was the first retractable roof stadium, and that was the big deal. I had the hotel out in there in the outfield, and it's a neat place. It really is. But I tend to agree with you. I think that probably is ready for a reboot if they can come up with something else. But I would love to see, as we mentioned before, I think that the notion that Tampa Bay wants to split time with Montreal is not a good idea. They've tried that with the Expos in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and it failed miserably. And now we have the Washington Nationals as a result. So if they're going to commit to Montreal, I'd love to see them do it full time, get the retractable roof stadium. They're talking about building downtown Montreal. I think it'd be and have them in the American League East instead of in the National League. So if they play the Yankees, if they play the Blue Jays, Blue Jays Expos 19 times a year, it's going to be pretty good. So I'd like to see that, but Tampa Bay definitely needs something that's I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know.
I would like to see an upgraded Angel Stadium. I like Angel Stadium fine. It's really nice to access. It's a very pleasant place to go watch a game, but I feel like it's suffered from all these like misguided remodels that have taken it from being a classic park to sort of less than some of its kind of pieces. I know they're talking about it, and there's always these squabbles with Anaheim and Artie Moreno and what to do with it. But I think that place, the Angels have a lot of fans, and they have the best player in baseball and the most exciting player in baseball. You can say which one of which. I think that place could use a little bit of love.
Definitely. And yeah, just wrapping up, where can we find all you on the internet? What plug whatever you want right now.
I am on Twitter at Timothy Malcolm, Instagram TS Malcolm, and you can find Moon Baseball Road Trips just about anywhere. Obviously, at bookstores like Tattered Cover, great independent bookstores across the country, but you can also find it on the web wherever you find books.
I would say find me at my newsletter, which is called Sports Stories. You can find it at sportsstories.substack.com or pick up Stealing Home at your favorite local bookstore, which today mine is Tattered Cover.
You can reach me at Tim Neverett on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all the food groups of social media. The book that I have is called COVID Curveball, an inside view of the 2020 Dodgers World Championship season. It is available right now for pre-sale on Amazon. We are doing some actual hard covers or early releases at Tattered Cover Monday, starting at noon. I'll be with Keith Law from The Athletic, and we're going to be talking about baseball in the pandemic. We're having an in-person event Monday there, and then I'm going to be actually at that big sports bar, Blake Street Tavern, Monday afternoon and Tuesday afternoon, signing more books over there and just having a meet and greet Q&A, a little more casual type thing, but anybody wants to come in there. And if anybody's in Denver and you come into Blake Street and pick up a book, first 20 people that pick up a book Monday and Tuesday, I buy you your first beer. So we're going to do that. So we're going to have some fun with that at the All-Star game. But Tattered Cover, I actually lived in Denver and did the Rockies pregame, postgame for a while on TV and did some of their games years ago and loved Tattered Cover and still do. And I found out they were going into McGregor Square. I said, what a great spot. Can't wait to go. So I'm so thrilled and happy to be able to do that event on Monday and looking forward to seeing the new store.
Definitely. Well, thank all three of you so much. Again, everyone out there listening, we're Tattered Cover. We have a new location where Tim Neverett's going to be at on Monday. We also have 1,000+ baseball books there. You can get all three of, well, you can get Timothy Malcolm and Eric Nusbaum's current books that are out. You can pre-order Tim's book, like he said, on Wednesday.
Mine will be there.
His will be there on Monday.
They're giving you the limited number of copies.
Pre-order or the preview. Well, thank you everyone so much. Everyone stay safe out there and have a great day. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.